on Now.
Welcome back. In our Melbourne studio is Josh Frydenberg, one of the young guns of the Liberal Party, certain to have a big future. Welcome to the program, Josh.
Good evening, Richo.
Now, you're in Melbourne and in Melbourne and Victoria. You're in Canberra tonight, sorry. But you're from, I should say you're from Melbourne.
That's true.
You've got this whole Ford debacle, and I do regard it as a debacle, 1.1 billion over a decade. Promises even as late as 6 months ago, we're here forever, and bang, they're gone. And it seems to be the same thing happened with Mitsubishi. Odds on to me, same thing will happen with General Motors. I think Toyota might hold on for longer because they've built up a reasonable export business. Are you and is your party still going to support big money subsidies to the car industry?
Well, we certainly support the car industry through the Automotive Transformation Scheme with $1 billion up to 2015 and $1 billion from 2015. But I think the key point here is that under the coalition, we were able to get productivity up in the automotive sector by 22%. We were able to get employment up by 22%. We were able to get turnover up by 74%. And we were able to get exports from the automotive sector up by 174%. Now, all of those indicators have come dramatically down under Labor. And, you know, this is a result of the industrialisation or the industrial disputes that we've had. This is also a result of the carbon tax, which has increased the price of every car, Richo, by $400. And when you think of the wafer-thin margins that some of these operators work on,
that's the outer end of the estimate, isn't it? That's the top end of the estimate. It's 200 to 400. It's easy to pick the 4. You could just as easily pick the 2.
Well, PwC say $400, and, you know, as we know, the carbon price is going up and up and up. So I don't believe that you can take a low estimate here. You know, $400 is a big hit to the cost. And when you consider that you can buy a Hyundai or a Kia car for a lot cheaper price, this is obviously causing, you know, real problems for domestic consumers.
But
I think the other...
I was just saying to us that productivity's gone up the last 7 quarters in a row.
Well, he told you a porky, because if you go to the industry department in his government, it actually says that under the coalition it went up 22%, and under them it's gone up about 1.5%.
No, it went down, but it's gone up 7 quarters in a row. That's what he's saying. They've turned a corner.
He's got his head in the sand because right across the economy, major projects have been postponed or cancelled because of the higher cost of doing business. I mean, even the Ford boss said when he announced the closure that if he was to produce a car in Europe, it would cost twice as much as it would in Australia. Twice, half of what it would cost in Australia. If he was going to produce a car in Asia, Richo, it would cost a quarter of what it costs in Australia. So this is the real issue here. How are we going to make our manufacturing sector vitally competitive with the rest of the world, because it is a very important sector and we can't afford to lose it.
Yeah, but there are 2 things to say about that. First is everybody in that industry says you need a production run of 200 to 300,000 to make it really viable, and we have runs of 25,000. You can never be viable on those numbers, can you?
Well, I understand it's 100,000 to be viable, and as I said, there's an important export market there. I mean, I drive a Ford Territory. It's a great car. Tony Abbott has said the same. There's no reason why, if you could get a left-hand drive to that,
you do have something in common, don't you? He drives one too.
Well, there you go. There's 3 we can think of. But, you know, there have been attractive cars. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the Falcon v Commodore days. The problem is, in 2005, 25% of the cars being sold in Australia were made in Australia. Today, that's fallen to 12.5%. And we don't want this to be, you know, a continued decline. We want to get the Productivity Commission to look at the sector, look at the way payments are being made, look at its structure. We want to try to build exports through, you know, invigorating Austrade to do that. I mean, Josh, we think we can do much more.
Ford had no exports, right? Isn't that one of the big problems? They had no exports even when you were in government. They haven't exported anything. And of course, the Falcon was a car that Australians clearly didn't want.
Well, this is an issue. How do we build export markets? And we believe, you know, working with Toyota and working with General Motors, we can actually do that. You know, they're both great companies, and, you know, they've both been operating in Australia for many, many years, and I think they're committed to Australia. But, you know, one thing we should point out here, Richo, is that last year the Prime Minister turned up at Ford with a cheque for $34 million and said, we are going to create 300 new jobs at Ford. Now, I ask your viewers, what did Greg Combay know? What did the Prime Minister know this time last year about whether Ford would continue? Because they promised jobs that not only never eventuated, but obviously Ford has closed down.
Yeah, but that's because Ford told them that's what they were going to do. That was part of the deal. They just didn't live up to it, just like Mitsubishi didn't some years ago. And that, what I worry about, Josh, is that that'll keep happening. But look, I don't want to stick on that because we've got only a few minutes left and there are other issues. Now, what about funding for ASIO? Does it really matter that our spooks seem to be underfunded or have had their funding cut? Does it really matter whether our spies are active?
Well, Anthony Byrne has made a dramatic statement to the Parliament saying it was disgraceful that the Gillard government has cut funding to ASIO, and they have cut it by more than $16 million on the 2011-12 budget. Now, this has meant that ASIO has to cut its foreign presence overseas, has to cut its training for its officers here in Australia, and we've seen the terrorist incident in Boston. We've seen what happened in London just last week. Australians know through our own tragic circumstances with Bali and with Jakarta and the bombings there, as well as London previously in Madrid, that we can't take the foot off the pedal here. And it's really, really important that we properly fund our intelligence and our security agencies because, the threat from Islamic extremism, both at home and abroad, is very, very real. It has not gone away, even though we're a decade on from 9/11.
It's the homegrown threat that really worries me. Why is it that Australia doesn't seem to be able, and I might say we're not Robinson Crusoe, the Brits haven't done it either, why can't we shut down these backyard imams, these ones who really conduct their services not in a mosque but in the lounge room with a dozen supporters around them, and they're the ones who preach this real vitriol, this real hate? Why can't we ever stop it? Why can't we deport them if they're not citizens? It just never seems to happen.
Well, they're good questions, but I have great confidence in ASIO, in their ability to monitor those who are threats, because, they've done it before. I mean, we've had thwarted terrorist attacks that were planned for Lucas Heights in Sydney, for the Holsworthy military barracks. In fact, there are 23 people who've been convicted in Australia since September the 11th for terrorist offences. That's a lot of people. And 4 thwarted attacks, according to the government's own national security strategy. So the threat is real, and David Irvine, the head of ASIO, Richo, has said he's very concerned by up to 200 Australians going to fight in Syria and joining often with jihadist groups. They'll come back to Australia radicalised, and this is a great concern to our intelligence agencies and should be a great concern to our parliament.
I've got to leave it very shortly, but I also worry about what we're doing with the Syrian opposition, because an awful lot of that Syrian opposition are not people we're going to like very much.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, Bashar al-Assad has been butchering his own people. Up to 100,000 people are dead. But as you say, there are al-Qaeda elements in the opposition, Richo, and those al-Qaeda elements are very radical, and there will be no partner for peace in the Middle East should the Syrian situation be resolved.
No doubt about that. Look, I'm going to have to leave it there, Josh. I'm sorry I could speak with you a lot longer, but we'll get you on again in another few weeks. There are more issues. Are you going to get a Guernsey in September?
Look, we're just going to work very hard to get to September 14 and hopefully win, but there's a long way to go between now and then, and we just got to keep driving home our alternative agenda for the country to build for a stronger economy and for greater national security.
Josh Frydenberg, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Richo.
And that's all there is for Richo this week. We'll be back next week with Richo and Jones. We'll see you then.